Good afternoon, students. Today we will start with biomolecules, which is unit 14 of volume 2. Right? Now, what are biomolecules? Now, a biomolecule is a chemical compound which is found in living organisms. These are those organic molecules that are involved in the maintenance, and they also involve the metabolic processes of living organisms. Right? So, these include such chemicals which are made up of mainly carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, sulfur and phosphorus. And biomolecules are the building blocks of life, and they perform important functions in living organisms. Now, which are the major category of biomolecules? These are carbohydrates, proteins, nucleic acids. Okay, so today we will be starting with carbohydrate chemistry, right? So, when we hear the name carbohydrates, right, it's very much clear that it is having something which is involving carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, because carbohydrates, right? So, carbohydrates are primarily produced by plants and form a large group of naturally occurring organic compounds. So, when we speak about carbohydrates, the first thing which comes in our mind is this thing, C6H12O6. And instantly, we tell about the name, that is glucose, right? So, C6H12O6 is not only glucose, but C6H12O6 also represents fructose. But simply looking at the molecular formula, it's not evident to us that why two things are having the same formula. The difference lies in their structure. Okay. Now, another carbohydrate is C12H22O11, that is sucrose or cane sugar, right? Another one is C6H12O5. This is nothing but rhamnose. So, these are carbohydrate molecules, right? Now, why the name carbohydrates? Now, if we go for the general formula of carbohydrate, it looks like this, CXH2OY. Okay. Now, let us relate this with the formula of glucose. For glucose, we can write C6H2O whole 6. Right. For fructose, also the same thing, C6H2O whole 6, right from the formula. If it is sucrose, we can write it as C12H2O whole 11. Right. Now, if we have a look at these forms, so the name carbohydrate came into existence because earlier the structure was not known, but from the very formula, it was assumed that maybe carbohydrate molecules were hydrates of carbon, because every carbon is associated with a water molecule. That was very much evident from the formula. But later, when through spectroscopic studies the structures were clear, then it was very much clear that it's not having something in its structure where each carbon is associated with a water molecule. It's not like that. So, if this would have been the main concept of carbohydrates, then rhamnose, what we have written here, C6H12O6, this is not C6H12. I have written something wrong, it's O5. Okay, so it's not fitting into this CH2O, CXH2OY, because the proportion of hydrogen and oxygen here, it's not 2:1, right? So, actually what are carbohydrates? Actually, carbohydrates are nothing but, they are chemically defined as optically active polyhydroxy aldehydes and ketones. So, these are carbohydrates. Okay. So, before elaborating this thing, okay, so let us first have a look at the structure of the simplest carbohydrate. Okay. Now, what do you mean by a simplest carbohydrate? A simplest carbohydrate is one. Means there are some carbohydrates which cannot be further hydrolyzed. to produce one or more carbohydrate molecules. They are the simplest carbohydrates. Later we will go into the classification and we will see to it. Now there are some carbohydrates which are sweet in taste and they are also called sugars. Okay. Now the common carbohydrate sugar is sucrose. So another carbohydrate which is sweet in taste, it's present in milk, it's known as lactose. Okay. And carbohydrates are also given the name saccharides. Right. So before going into the classification, let us have a look at the structure of glucose. Okay, which is a simple sugar. Why it's a simple sugar? Again, I am repeating because it cannot be hydrolyzed further, right? To generate one or more simpler units of sugar. Now, let us concentrate on the structure of C6H12O6, and here it is not fructose but glucose. So what is the structure here? So the structure of glucose looks like this. So we have 6 carbon atoms joined end to end to form a chain like this. The first one is an aldehyde group and the last carbon represents a primary alcohol. And starting from carbon 2 to carbon 5, these are something where secondary alcoholic OH group is there. So the groups are aligned like this: H, OH, H, H, right? So simply this is OH, H, OH, OH, right? So what is this? This is nothing but, this is named as a D-glucose, right? Now after capital D, I have given a bracket, I have written plus or minus, that we cannot specify. Okay, plus or minus represents the optical activity. Okay, whether it's dextrorotatory or it's levorotatory, that is very much evident from the experiment. We cannot see that. But here we have written capital D. Means from our optical activity it's known that plus means it's also represented as a small d. That means it is dextrorotatory. Similarly, if we write a minus or small l, that is levorotatory. So that is something related to the optical rotation. Okay, and whether a substance is dextro or a levo, that means it deviates the light which is passing through it. That means it's optically active. So that is the meaning of plus and minus. But what about this capital D? That we are going to discuss within a few seconds. Okay, so this is the structure of D-glucose, right? Now let us have a look at the structure of fructose. So fructose very much looks like this. I'm showing it on this side. 6 carbon atoms. The formula is C6H12O6 only, right? So they are joined end to end, where the first carbon is a primary alcohol. Second, the last one is also that one. The second one is a ketonic carbonyl. And again we have this orientation from third to fifth. Right? So this is fructose. This is nothing but D-fructose. Again I am writing plus or minus. Actually we cannot write both, it's known. That depends upon experiment. So now let us have a look at the structure and let us see whether it is sufficing this name optically active polyhydroxyaldehyde and ketone or not. Have a look at the structure of glucose first, this one. It's having an aldehyde group. So in this very compound, aldehyde is the main functional group. Now at the end we are having a primary alcohol and there are 4 secondary alcoholic OH groups. So yes, it's a polyhydroxyaldehyde. Similarly, if we have a look at the structure of fructose, it is having at the 2 ends 2 primary alcoholic OH groups. 1 ketonic carbonyl is there at the second carbon and 3 other secondary alcoholic OH groups are there. So it's a polyhydroxyketone, right? Got the point? Now, if we have a look at glucose, it is also known as Aldo Hexose. And if we look at fructose, it is also known as ketohexose, right? So what's the meaning of Aldo Hexose? Aldo represents that an aldehyde group is there. Hex means it's a 6 carbon member and Ose means it belongs to the sugar family, carbohydrate family, right? Similarly, here it is ketohexose, so it's having a ketonic carbonyl. It's a 6 carbon member and it belongs to the sugar family, right? So that's why, or the carbohydrate family, or the saccharide family, whatever, right? Now let us now have a look at the thing what is known as a D-glucose and a D-fructose, right? Now if we draw the structure of D-glucose, D means we are stressing on that capital D. Here we are not considering the small d. Okay, so this is D-glucose. If there is something like capital D, there is another notation also, that is capital L. So if this becomes D-glucose, we are not specifying the rotation here. So let us first draw the mirror image of it. Okay, so what's the mirror image? So this is nothing but it is L-glucose, right? Got the point? So from here we can say that D-glucose and L-glucose are mirror images of one another. Okay. Now if we consider the glucose molecule, so that's a member of the carbohydrate family. But if you're asked about what is the smallest structure of a carbohydrate molecule, or the simplest one, simplest we will not consider, the smallest one. Okay, the smallest carbohydrate looks very much like this. This is known as nothing but a D-glyceraldehyde. Again I am mentioning we are not representing the rotation here. Okay, now have a look at this. Why this is named as a D? Okay, so here have a look. If you are going to look vertically, so if we just mark the central carbon, it's a chiral one. So we are showing that with an asterisk sign. It's a chiral center, or it's a chiral carbon, or it's an asymmetric carbon, right? Now here vertically at the top CH2 group is there. Vertically at the bottom CH2 group is there. Now if we consider the horizontal groups, on the right hand side we have OH, on the left hand side we have H. Now if we consider the two groups, one on the right hand side and the other one on the left hand side, so if we concentrate on OH, OH is that group which is directly attached through O to the carbon atom. Okay. Now if we consider the electronegativity of hydrogen and oxygen, oxygen is more electronegative one and it is directly attached to the chiral center and it's on the right hand side. So that's why, since this OH group is on the right hand side, this is specified as a D-glucose. Similarly, what about the L-glucose then? So for L-glucose we will have this OH group, that means which is linked through O directly to the carbon atom, that very group is on the left hand side. Okay, that's why it is known as L-glyceraldehyde. Right? So now have a look and compare what is the relationship between D-glyceraldehyde and L-glyceraldehyde. One is the mirror image of the other. Okay, so from here in the next class we are going to see from here how we are getting into the concept of D and L for glucose, right? Thank you.